Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon, one and all. I would like to congratulate all participants attending this conference. His Excellency, the President of this conference, our Minister of Education, Mr. Abad. I would also like to bring greetings to all the other members coordinating this General Conference, Irina Bukova, Director General of UNESCO. And I would like to thank you for this invitation to participate at the 6th International Conference on Adult Education. I would like to express my special gratitude to Princess Laurentin and to express my gratitude to all for holding this 6th International Conference on Adult Education here in our country, in Brazil. The theme suggested for my presentation is one based in a way on my life experience. It is a deposition I can bear witness to living and learning for a viable future, the power of adult learning. I know that the challenge extended to me is that I come before you to speak and that this be used as a source of inspiration for the proceedings and the work of this conference, which is a huge responsibility that was given to me. And I'd like to start off by quoting Alfonso de Santana, the poet, the speech that he delivered at a ceremony at the Rio de Janeiro ceremony. And Santana says the following. He says that the word, in pronouncing a word, is no longer something that belongs to us. A word is no longer part of our possessions, and it doesn't belong to us once it is pronounced. And he says the speaker is spoken by a statement, so I hope to be referred to by my statement, that Santana says, because perhaps this is the best way of contributing to this conference in everything that has to do with a chronicle of an individual who became a literate individual at the age of 16. The themes that I would try to link to that witness has to do with matters such as the protection of the environment, cultural legacy, ethical issues, the role of priority that one has to give to the education of young people and adults, and how that can be of assistance in facing the challenge of development, the empowerment of beginners, learners, and new horizons for their lives, and other matters that are linked to the future, to a future that might be of hope and of promise for individuals, even though they did not have access to education at the age in which they should have been given that access. I know that these matters and these issues pass and seep through our entire lives, and no doubt that they continue to seep through our lives. I am no specialist in education. I have a background in history, and I'm a professor of mid-level education. As was already stated, I'm a senator for the Republic for the state of Acre in the Amazon region. And a place that I will refer to is a place of someone who became a literate person at the age of 16 through the different means and existent mechanisms that existed in 1975. At that time, it was Mobral. Mobral was the period of the military dictatorship. We did not have a democracy in Brazil. And therefore, the literacy program for young people and adults was called Mobral. And I am the result of a Mobral in my literacy program, and later on I worked in the equivalent of mid-level, first and second level education at the time. So my entire basic education is a mid-level education, and it was followed through these processes of speeding up learning and education, which was not the normal thing at the time. So it was first and second level education with Mobral at the time. So I'd like to share this with you, not the gratitude that I have for these programs, but what I learned from these programs. For a long time, when I occupied a public space at a national level, people came to me and asked me to say that learning and education is something that has to do with a lack of will, and that I was an example showing that if people had the will and if they really set their minds to it, that they could be educated. And I never wanted to abide by that. I never wanted to do that because I thought that it was incomplete. It seemed to me that it was simply biased. There is a need, obviously, to have the will and the endeavor and the dedication and the devotion by the individual. But not all individuals, not all persons have the possibility to even turn that will into practice. I was born in Senegal, in the Amazon, and it is a part of the forest, of the jungle, 70 kilometers away from the closest city, smack in the middle of the Amazon. And I didn't have any health, I didn't have any education, I did not have no services that were given to us or offered by the state. In that place, we had close to 300 families, and we had approximately 11 children per family, a lot of children, and my mother had 11 children. And of these children, 320 times multiplied by 11, whatever you have, they're children that never made it to university. It was not a matter of having a lack of will. It was simply a matter of opportunity. All individuals have the same powers, the same potential. What they're missing, what they're lacking is opportunities. I read, after I received my education in history, I made 2 specialization courses, one on psychoanalytical theory and the other one on psychopedagogics. And I became passionate, and I really got involved with psychopedagogics because I thought that the will was very important in that learning and education process. But I was very impressed by the words used by Freire. Freire says that there are 3 impossible things: educate, healing, and governing. And in a way, I ended up concentrating on these 3 things because being a politician, I spend my whole time dealing with governance. Being a professor, I have read a lot, and I deal with the possibility of educating. And being someone that has already been accepted many a times when I was living in the forest and was affected by health problems, I also ended up dealing with the problem of healing. I'm not a doctor, but it seems to me that the cure is not only in the hands of a physician or of a doctor, but it has to do with the relationship between the doctor and the patient. The same thing that learning and educating is a relationship between the learner together with the professor, as Isa Fernandez used to say. And there's also another very important matter that should be considered, and it is something that I want to mention and share with you today. Our possibility of reaching the Millennium Development Goals is greatly dependent on the capacity and the ability that we will have in each one of those stages, in each one of those objectives, that we do our best in dealing with resources and in dealing with the correct policies, particularly the implementation of these right policies. And it is also with this vision and with this approach that I want to speak here before this 6th CONFINTEA. I'm straying away because of my personal history, because I bear witness to what this can do. But I want to locate ourselves. I want to concentrate on that desire for learning, being a child in the middle of the forest with families that never have had access to education. So our reality was common to all. We all lived in the same conditions. And usually the education we received was informal education. It was education to help us and to help our parents in their activities, usually agricultural activities, farming, extracting latex, looking after the animals that we had with us and that we tamed. And education existed, but it was not formal education the way other children received, those children living in the city, the way they had access to formal education. So that desire, that wish to start studying, coexisting with people that did not study and being such a distant reality, it seems to me that it started with two different things. One with a dream, and the other one, the lack. What was my dream? Well, I wanted to be a nun when I was a child. And they gave me the basis, the fundamentals of my grandmother, and they gave me the principles of a Catholic education. So I was living in the forest with my grandmother, with my father, and they gave me the basic education of the principles of Christianity. And they said that the place where they had come from, which was at the northeastern state in Brazil, the state of Ceará, which is a beautiful state in our country, that they had nuns, and I asked, what are nuns? And she said that these are people that devote their life to God. And I said, well, when I grow up, I want to be a nun. And she used to say she was an illiterate person, but she was very intelligent, my grandmother. And she used to say, sweetie, a nun cannot be illiterate. So I grew up with that obstacle. I wanted to be a nun, but I could not be a nun because a nun could not be an illiterate person. Then in my small head as a child, I was thinking that what I had to do was to solve the problem of being an illiterate person because I wanted to be a nun. And that was something that was my dream. That is what I call my dream, becoming a nun. Now, the lack of respect, it was something that I didn't have. I did not have education. I did not have access to education. My family is beautiful, but nobody had access to education. But something that I missed also after the age of 14 was health. I had malaria. 5 times I had malaria, and 3 times I had hepatitis. So I was very sick at the age of 14, and I was not able to work, helping my parents in the farming activities, in the agricultural activities, in extracting latex, and looking after my brothers and sisters because my mother had passed away at the time. That same year when I turned 14, she passed away. So that for me was something very difficult. It was a very serious fault, a lack of my mother, a lack of work, a lack of education, and these lacks and these shortages lead to paralyzing an individual. But in my case, they lead to a huge need for making up for that fault and that flaw with other activities. And that's how I started thinking, well, if I want to become a nun, I'm illiterate, then I have the capacity, the ability. I don't have the health, but I need to look after my health and to solve my problem of being an illiterate person in order to become a nun. But something interesting happened, which was precisely the symbolic universe that I had in the forest, in the jungle, with the individuals that lived in that community. My grandmother was illiterate, but as I told you, she was very intelligent, and she loved literature. Cordelo literature here in Brazil is a popular way of reading poetry, in which they have rhymes, particularly speaking of the cultural, social universe of the simplest persons, workers, and farm workers, agricultural workers. And my grandmother was capable of reading one book in 2 or 3 times, and she read it for herself, and she was reading these books to me. Well, she was telling me what she understood. She was reciting these books